Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Tonight, you're going to see a look back at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, where we've been, where we're going, and some very proactive plans that we have for 2024 and beyond. There'll be a discussion of our new initiative, in particular, what we call space micro grants, which are already starting to catch on big time. And we're bringing, new people into our orbit before they even hit the garage. This is really exciting. And a recent data analysis study indicated that the commercial space economy's growth is completely uncorrelated with other asset class investment sectors over a 17-year period. What does that mean for the future of our industry? And how long will the good times last? We'll be speaking with the author of that study. From the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and this is The Unknown Quantity. I'd like to bring in Michael. And joining me is Michael Lane, a cohort of mine at the center, and he's also helping run the video portion of this podcast. Welcome, Michael, and thanks for
setting how are you?
I am doing great. It's been a very eventful year this year, and we've been having a lot of fun and going a lot of places. And we spent, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say you've got a lot going on here with the center, so. Maybe where we start is explain what the center is, a little bit about its history, what you've been doing, what the team has been doing, because there's going to be a lot. This is our first episode, our first episode.
Making mistakes already.
We're gonna be doing this twice a month, so pretty excited about that. And there's a lot to talk about. This space industry is changing by the minute. It's unrecognizable from when you and I met in 2003 in Colorado. It's pretty different from that Friday night midnight call where I think I'm going to talk to a voicemail and you pick up, right? It's pretty different for over the last 20 years. So let's talk a little bit about that. But let's jump into who is the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. What have they been doing, and where are they going?
Okay, the Center for Space Commerce and Finance is actually an offshoot of earlier work we had done at the Space Frontier Foundation for many years. We got tapped to do what became our group. Got tapped to do something. It's still a project for the foundation. It was called the New Space Business Plan Competition, and they were running that thing at a very low level for many years. They started around 2005 or so. Well, in 2011, we hit an unparalleled jackpot that we were never expecting, and which we got a fairly decent grant from NASA Ames. And that was when Pete Worden was running it, and he wanted to take some chances. He was running what they called the portal back then for space commercial activity. And this is a way to get some stage time. And since we were actually running our conference at Ames at the time, it just seemed like a perfect fit. And so we got that first year, we got from them a $25,000 grand prize for a competition, when before it had been $1,000 to $2,500, and then and we also got about half again that number in just general program support. So we got to pay for a lot of people's airfare and hotel just to get them out there to do things, including some of the finalists themselves. And we had to set up a whole system from scratch to first get finalists in the door, weed them out. We had a lot of applications. When you have a prize like that, many are called, few can be chosen. And so we had to develop methodologies to do that, many of which we still use to this day. Go ahead.
Dig a little into that business plan competition, because that's really kind of what we're known for, right?
Absolutely. That's been our stock and trade since actually 2009. We started running a BPC out of the foundation. We got the NASA grant we took 2010 off. We got the NASA grant in 2011, 2012, and 2013. And for the second 2 years, there was actually a $100,000 grand prize.
Yeah,
We never had so good since then, but well, it was just a golden, glorious era for us. We got a lot done, and all totaled, all the years we've been doing business plan competitions or other types of pitch events, like lightning pitch, we called it one year. We've probably introduced maybe 70, maybe more startup space companies to the world.
Say that again. Let that sink in for a second. How many?
Yeah, about 70.
About 70 space startups.
Over 15 years.
Yep.
This has been 15 years, Michael.
Yeah.
We've been doing this, and we're still doing it. And when we started doing it, we were the only game in town. And today, I like to think we're still first and best in what we do, because because there are other pitch events around now for space and related things, and they're even in other parts of the world now. But still, to this day, no one does what we do, which I call service after the sale, which is if you get to be a finalist, you also get to attend a day to a day and a half boot camp. And basically where we tear the finalists apart and we put them back together again. And at the end of it, their presentation pitch is so vastly improved over what it was when they first walked in the door. It's not even believable. And we're going to have a guy on here in a few minutes who's going to actually can confirm that and talk about his experience last year for Sharks in Space. I hope he comes. Emmett Spurlock's his name. He should be here any minute. But we've been doing this for about 15 years. We also took over something we call these Space Investment Summits. And that was a series of programs that actually started back in 2007 as it was an independent thing. And then it became part of a National Space Society's International Space Development Conference. We do one a year at ISDC and another independent one someplace, usually in Silicon Valley. And that was getting everybody together. That was an offshoot of the, what did they call it? I can't remember now. It'll come to me. There was an old Space Business Roundtable. That's what it was. Yeah. And that was an NSS thing, but they also had some of the big players, and they talked about, big stuff for a long time. We were getting everybody here. We were getting Wall Street guys in the room. We were getting all sorts of different kinds of folks, and a lot of Silicon Valley VC type guys.
Well, and we were also getting what are now kind of household names. That was the beginning of what's now Virgin Galactic, and the Virgin Group was getting in there. A lot of the folks from Sierra Space were in there. Those days were really, I was describing it to somebody over the weekend. I was at the Mars Society conference this last weekend, and I remember going to the La Quinta Hotel in LA, and there's maybe 80 people there, and it's $80 a night, like 20 some years ago. And we're all just kind of building this future in our imaginations, and then having drinks, making deals, and actually figuring out how to get hardware constructed. So those were pretty heady days for the whole industry. And I like to think that the work that the center has done was a catalyst of all that. Certainly the Space Frontier Foundation and the National Space Society that you just described, they were catalysts for the new world that we're in now. So,
and hopefully we're still catalyzing. That was part of our history too, because after they did a major changing of the guard at the Space Frontier Foundation in 2015, and they decided they didn't want to do a BPC anymore. And so, but we had this big budget. We had this pile of cash sitting in there. It was dedicated to us that we'd gotten from sponsors and things over the years. And it stacked up a little bit. And I thought, well, maybe we shouldn't let this die. Maybe we should take a shot and say, let's split off. Let's take that cash, which you're willing to give to us, split off from the foundation to form our own 501c3 organization, which is what we did. That's what the center is now. Right. And any potential donors out there, 501c3 tax write-off, go get it. But I just had to throw, naked pitch, I just had to, and I can't help myself, I'm a booster. But since then we had we had some events that we were doing in 2016. In 2017, we really kicked off. We did 3 BPCs, business plan competitions, in that year, and they were associated with different conferences in 2017 alone. And then we were averaging 2 a year for a while. 2018, 2019, we also did another. In 2018, I believe it was, we also did a space investment summit in Europe for the first time.
Oh, right. Yeah.
It was part of New Space Luxembourg. And that was a huge, huge event. And it went over very, very well. And I made a lot of great contacts out of that I still talk to this day, over, about a lot of different initiatives. I'm getting them involved now.
I just saw General Warden this weekend. He came out to the, you mentioned him earlier when he was the director at NASA Ames. I know him back from his Air Force days, and he's still advising the Principality of Luxembourg on their space missions.
Good. I'm glad he's still involved in doing things, since he had a very intense career path there at Ames for a while, and then, of course, he had to go somewhere else. And after he did that, well, the grants kind of went with him. But we're going to get that back in a lot of new and different ways that we're going to discuss a few pieces of over time here. I've got all sorts of. Oh, look at that! Oh, okay. I just keep looking at the comments on the left. There are links for everybody to click onto, and when you get a chance, you should open it up in a new tab and take a look. So where are we now? Right now, we have to talk about this. We went through a little period in the wilderness, like everybody did during COVID. 2020, 2021 period, not much is happening. There were no conferences going on. Everything was shut down. And we were in a business that relied on conferences and conference attendance. Mm-hmm. And actually, Michael, I want to hand a kudo to you, because it was you who saved our butt.
Thanks.
During that period, you brought in some guy I'd never seen before, who had a lot of wild ideas, and he was running something called Foundation for the Future.
Tim.
And they'd agreed to hire us to do not 1 but 3 virtual New Space Business Plans competitions.
That's us pivoting again. Yeah, that was us pivoting again, right? We had to kind of, like everybody else, we had to adjust to the circumstances. Tim Christman was running the Foundation for the Future, and he was hosting through video. He was hosting a 2-day conference every month for a year, and wanted content, and his focus was on the commercialization of space. He wanted to go a different direction and really focus on getting some congressional support and introduction and passage of a couple bills. And he used that tool as a catalyst, as a lever to get himself in front of folks in Congress. And that was very effective. And what he asked me to do was help develop content for it. So I reached out to us, but I wore different hats. Like one day I'd be on the board, the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. One day I'd be, managing the conference series for Tim. So y'all stepped up. It was actually quite terrific.
It was absolutely amazing. In fact, one of our, because I've been saying for years, we do have certain poster child teams from various previous BPCs that went on to do really well. Like one of those companies is called Spire. You may have heard of them. They participated in 2012. It was one of the $100,000 years. But out of the virtual conferences, it was called Esper Satellite Imagery. There's this company out of Australia, and they did an incredible presentation, and they won the prize in late 2021. Since then, Esper Satellite Imagery has gotten a huge amount of angel and VC money, and they're getting contracts now.
Wow!
And they're going to launch stuff soon. So they've done really well. So yeah, we can take a little bit of credit for that.
A little bit of credit.
They're doing
That's somebody we get on the show next time.
We gave them the impetus and direction. And yes, I do want to get people like this on the show very soon.
Yeah.
So so that leads us up to now that particular period that got us out of the wilderness and kept us going. And actually in 2022, we actually managed to host a new space business plan competition as part of the International Astronautical Congress.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the Super Bowl of space conferences,
right,
in Paris. God, that was fun. I was hoping to do it again this year in Milan, but it's not going. The timing was off. It wasn't going to work out. But we're all geared up for next year in Sydney.
Yep.
And we already have boots on the ground in Sydney between Esper Satellite Imagery and Jason Held, who was one of the contestants in 2012. Yep. He's down there doing a whole bunch of stuff, and they have their own accelerator that they're doing, and they can bring a whole bunch of people to the table that can help us get that thing rolling and boost it everywhere. And the entire investment community down there is going to show up. Okay. So I'm really looking forward to next. I think it's late September, and in Sydney. So that's what we're doing for that. Now we have, since we've been rebuilding the center from scratch, I got to throw this in. What happened was I got a call from an old friend last October, and he was the one who offered to really help hit the reset button on what we were doing. And he started in with a pretty significant donation. He's also agreed to match the next $200,000 of donations that we get in the future. His name is Bob Werb. He's an old dear friend, and he's also he's on our board now. And but he was also one of the original founders of the Space Frontier Foundation. Right. And was the board chair for many years.
He has been a pioneer since the beginning.
Absolutely. Wonderful guy. And so I hope he sticks with us for a long time. Right. And it's all about what you can give or what you can get, and we're all doing our best. And Bob is a huge help. Thank you, Bob, if you're listening. So that brings us up to the present day. What we've been doing, we've been revamping our website an awful lot, and to reflect the new initiatives that we're doing. One initiative that we're doing is this podcast. We're putting this podcast out, and we're going to keep talking about every kind of conceivable topic in new space business, new space finance, and anything that might be related to it. And we're going to get a good example of that really shortly.
Speaking of which, Emmett is on the call here.
Yes, so I know. And we are now segueing into the next segment. Perfect. And that is the other initiative that we're doing called Space Micro Grants. Now, we took a page from an organization called the Awesome Foundation. At least loosely took a page from them, in that they have these chapters all over the country, and they do all sorts of things. And awesome health, awesome food, awesome kids playing, awesome everything. Everything's awesome to them. And they also raise micro grant types of funding, and for people doing all sorts of interesting things, and in social networking, in the arts, and all sorts of things. And we didn't go straight with that and we could have just do an awesome space, but I think we would have ended up being a small voice in a very large chorus. And so we thought we'll make some tweaks, and we'll initiate this ourselves and we want to be ourselves integrated with the space community in particular. This is who we are. It's what we do. It's our goal is to champion space startups. And so what a better way to do this than to actually start from the very beginning, before some of these folks even hit the garage. You have an idea you've sketched out on the back of a cocktail napkin, and it sounds really cool. And you'll get some early feedback is what's going to happen. It's what we offer to help with. And we've already since we've initiated this, we actually have two separate pages that this is on. They're exactly the same. You can do the one on the center's website. There is also an independent one, spacemicrofunds.com. You can go to. They're exactly the same. They have a nice little application page, and you fill out the application page, and you hit the button, and that's it. And it comes in my inbox over here. And so we've got about a dozen so far, and they all look really good. So making the first choice is going to be fun. And they're $1,000 micro grants.
Okay.
And we're going to be awarding the first one close to the end of this month.
So who's eligible, and what do we hope that they accomplish with this $1,000?
Well, that's the Well, that's the whole thing. We're doing this we're going out in a wing and a prayer too with some of this. We're doing this no strings, no specific things that you have to do. You can spend $1,000 if you wish.
No strings attached to this.
Yeah. So you can buy office supplies with it. You can pay someone to design your website for you, or you could just take a few days off work to finish writing your business plan. Whatever, however meaningful that is to you. And
when I was getting started, okay, granted it was 25 years ago when I started first getting into space. That would have been business cards and collateral. That might have been a flight to maybe California for one of the conferences, and a hotel, and that would have been enough, right? That would have been enough to kind of get a ball rolling. Now, we don't have any deep expectations that somebody who's applying for this micro grant is going to go out and start the next Blue Origin. They're not going to start the next Axiom, but maybe they are, right? Maybe they are.
You never know. You absolutely never know.
Yeah.
Okay. But with us to talk about this some more is Emmett Spurlock, and I want him to come in now. I guess if Leah can help us with that.
There
we go.
There he is.
Hey, guys.
Hey. Emmett, how you doing, man? It's been forever. This is Emmett Spurlock, ladies and gentlemen. He's the Chief Operating Officer of the ZC Institute, and ZC stands for Zero Carbon. They're working on an alternative energy program that sounds really, really compelling, and they were a finalist in last year's Sharks in Space competition. So two things I want to cover with you, Emmett, is that first off, what happened was after everyone did their presentations and the judges went off to deliberate, this guy comes up to me, I didn't know who he was, and said he wanted to sponsor a $1,000 prize for the, as an audience, populist vote for whoever they thought was, the best presenter that morning. And they got that to happen. And his name was Tim Dodd, and he's also known on online media and in Twitter and everybody as the Everyday Astronaut. And so he's got a big following, and he set this up all on his own. He approached me and said, "I want to do this." "Oh, sure, please, this would be great." And it turned out it was ZC Institute that got the $1,000. How did you feel about that? And what'd you do with it?
Well, first of all, it came as a total surprise because when we went to the competition, we knew that the target audience was going to be VCs and looking for programs that can have a quick return on investment. And we knew that ours was going to be a long shot because we're looking at more of 3 to 5 years just to start getting some revenue coming in. So when they came out and had the audience's choice, and they announced us, all the folks we had there was Greg Hodgkin, my CEO, plus we had our CSO there and her husband. We were all just sitting there. We were looking around like, wait a minute, that's us. How the heck did we win this? And it was like, we were just like, woohoo! And we all, at the time, my co-founder, he was dressed up as Zephram Cochrane. Oh. And so you see him jumping up and down. And it was a special moment for us because it's one thing for the judges to pick the winners, but then having your peers come out and say, "Hey, we think what you guys are doing is fantastic," even though some people might say we are crazy, that our ideas like there's sci-fi and there's sci-fi. And the fact that we actually have a chance to make this actually work and people recognize that felt damn good. Now, you asked, what do we do with that $1,000? Well, we use it to pay off some of our bills because we're still bootstrapping things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it helped to offset some of the costs for us to go out to New Worlds. And then also helped us go out to, where was the next one? There was another space conference in Los Angeles. So went out to that and they used some of the money for that as well. Yeah. But every little bit, when you're a startup, every little bit helps.
Absolutely.
Emmett, I don't know you that well, right? I don't know you at all, really. So what stage were you at when you were in the audience? What stage were you at when you were pitching for the business plan?
Pre-seed.
Pre-seed.
Now, we just hit our 3-year anniversary just a couple weeks ago.
Okay.
And we were fortunate that we had one angel investor gave us a small infusion of cash, which kept us afloat. But we were there at New Worlds. Again, we were still a pre-seed. That was our second year going. The first year we had heard about it and we were invited to it. We said, all right, let's go check it out. Last year we went, now we are a known commodity.
Right.
So then we saw a lot of people that we saw beforehand, Tom being one of them. And it was so that's where we were, and we still are trying to get that first big tranche of cash coming in. But right now we have made so many advances in the last year. It's amazing. It almost reminds you of Moore's Law, with computers. Like every 18 months, it doubles in speed. We went from 1994, where they said all you need is dark matter, and you can achieve what we're trying to do, to the point now that it got down to saying you need 1/10 the mass of the sun, then down to the size of the Great Pyramid of Giza, and now it's down to a can of Coke. And we are really close to actually making that happen. And so we've done all the theoretical pieces of it. We've run it through some modeling and simulation, and we've got our engineers which are chomping at the bit to say, give us some money so we can get some equipment so that we can actually go in and actually do the proof of concept.
So I'm a little unclear. What would you say your elevator pitch was? What are you trying to do, and what got the audience so excited?
Well, I'll say we've had a couple different things. One that I like that we've done beforehand is to cater to two different markets, to two different age groups. One age group that grew up watching Back to the Future, we say is Mr. Fusion.
Okay.
At the back of the car. And people, a little bit of older age will understand that. And then for the younger generation, we talk about Tony Stark, the Iron Man arc reactor.
Right there.
And so they can resonate with that. They can understand that. And so we're saying it basically is that's what we're trying to do. Now, I should say trying to do. That's what we will do. We will be able to get it down to where it's going to be compact enough where it can be used whether it be on a ship, whether it be used in a power plant, and whatnot. But it's the way we're talking about doing it, though, is different than what everybody else is doing for fusion. Everybody else has always been, we're 20 years away from fusion, and every 10 years it keeps it at 20 years away. We actually could probably be within 5 years. Once we get that proof of concept, we could probably be within 5 years of actually having fusion, where it's not going to be one of these giant labs that we have out of at CERN, Lawrence Livermore, or others. We could probably just actually come to that in a small laboratory based on all the research that we've done and whatnot.
Gotcha. That would, I loved Back to the Future. I loved Iron Man. I can imagine a world where portable power changes everything. We have in the Defense Department at Space Force, they have a phrase that goes something like, "Power in space means power in space," right? So if you can have any amount of energy in a compact form, it changes the dynamics of everything that we do on orbit and down here on the ground. So I can imagine the audience was pretty excited about that.
We still got a couple minutes before the other folks come. We're going to see the next segment. Until then, though, Emma, since you were taking part in the pitch event that day, you also got to spend some time the day before, in and out at least, of our boot camp that we did. I'd like to wonder if you wouldn't mind sharing your thoughts on that process. And
I will do that. But I must say is I also attended the boot camp in 2022.
Okay.
where
Yes.
I'm just walking around in the hotel spaces, and someone comes up to me and says, "Oh, are you here for the pitch competition coaching session?" I looked around like, "Sure, I'm here for that."
Yes, I am.
So, hey, you think I'm here for a pitch competition? Yeah, sure. And it was just that's where I met Tom, and he was sitting in front of me along with Jeff. What I forgot Jeff's last name.
Kruken.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And I'm sitting back there taking notes because I knew we weren't going to be able to pitch that year, but at least I wanted to talk to the experts, such as Tom, to get an idea of what do we need to do to improve our pitch.
Gotcha.
And whether it be visuals, whether it be eye contact that you're making with the audience, whether it be the tone of your voice, whether it be not too much on a slide and really talking to the slide versus having the slide talk for itself, those are things that I was trying to take from that. And so in 2023, I purposefully went to sitting on the pitch sessions, and again is listening to some of the judges who are trying to help out. It just gave an idea of how you can refine your pitch, understanding who your target audience is, understanding how much time you have, and that you really need to own your material. And how do you own it? How do you embrace it? And how do you get your point across? Because your passion, it can be contribute so much to what you're trying to do. If you're very monotone, it falls over like a piece of flat toast, flat bread.
Yeah.
But if you are passionate about it, it comes out.
It does.
And people then get intrigued by it, or they get sucked into your presentation.
Right.
And watching groups who hadn't pitched before and seeing them their first time, and then seeing how they go back and refine their pitch and go back to Tom and the other coaches and see how they have refined it, and then to get more coaching on that, and then seeing their final pitch in front of an audience, it's a huge transformative process. And I think everyone that goes through the coaching, they become a better pitch man than they would have been otherwise.
That's as Tom talks about, that's some of our secret sauce, and he calls it the service after the sale, right? That it's not just about, all right, so just so you know, kind of the back end, we put out this call, there's a funnel, a lot of people show up and they have kind of honestly mediocre business plans, and they send us an executive summary, and we whittle, I'm going to just make up numbers and keep it simple, but 20 applicants will come in, we'll pick one, and then 3 weeks or so before we all meet up, we'll call them, we'll talk to them, we'll have a couple, 2 or 3 sessions of virtual coaching before they even show up in Austin. And then we kind of pass it off to the next stage where we have the boot camp. And so we see these really raw, often terrible business plans. And then Tom and I and Jeff, and then usually a couple others, sometimes Megan's there, sometimes Michael Mewling's there, will all look at these just kind of truly dreamer state executive summaries, and then this one could do something, this one could do something, this one, and there's a little bit of Goldilocks where we're trying to find the one that's just right, that has a good idea, has a good team, has an interesting business that is both space scalable, and it could lead to something big in the future. And then we bring them all together. So it's a multi-week, multi-month process before you even get to the stage. So I think it's really exciting. I've loved kind of doing the work with the Center for Space Commerce and Finance. We only have just a minute longer with you, Emma. Is there anything that you would like to say that kind of was there an aha moment, a eureka moment? Was there something that felt particularly useful or powerful out of that whole experience?
I can't say there's just one thing. There's probably a number of things, but from my perspective, is as when we were watching people that we would talk to either officially in the pitch competition or more so in the events leading up to it, is you see people who are naysayers, and they're saying your idea is, I hope I can say this, batshit crazy.
Crazy. We've all done that.
And then they start but then once we get them to listen for like 2 minutes, and they come back and start asking some questions, and when they come back and they don't say you're wrong, they say is you're not wrong. That is huge, because when you're coming from very cynical people in the scientific community, when they say you're not wrong, that is huge, because then they're saying is you've got something going here potentially. Mm-hmm. And that part was, for us, it was like, yes, all this work that we're doing is paying off, because people that we either have met casually beforehand or for the first time, and they're giving their feedback, that is empowering. Now, granted, we get probably more than anything, sometimes a lot of naysayers, but says, give us 2 minutes. And we just says, just listen to us for a minute. And then they come back and they almost have an epiphany, which then reinforces our thing of, you know what, we're doing this the right way. And so that's what, for me, is whenever we talk with someone new and you see the excitement on their face as well, that drives us.
Yeah. It's always like, and this is an old story. You've always heard there's 3 stages to an idea. It'll never work. It will work, but it's way too expensive. And I knew it was a good idea all the time. I was behind them all the way. and on that, we got to go to the next segment. But Emmett Spurlock, thank you so much for coming and sharing your insights. It's been a real treat, and happy to have you on this first inaugural program of The Unknown Quantity.
Thank you for having me, guys. I do appreciate it. Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay. Next up, a very interesting thing happened just a couple of weeks ago. A paper was presented with lots of lovely analysis and a lot of data. And it showed that, interestingly, the commercial space economy's growth is completely uncorrelated with any other asset class investment sector over a 17-year period. And so what does that mean for our industry? And as I said before, how long will the good times last? My guests to discuss this tonight are the author of the paper herself, Megan Crawford, who is a partner and principal at Space Fund that produced the paper, and Michael Mealing, a partner and principal from Starbridge Capital. Welcome, guys. How you doing?
Good. Great. Thank you for having me.
Oh, God. Well, thanks for being here. This is a great thing. I don't know who else is really discussing this topic, but I wanted to make sure somebody was discussing this topic.
It's just us 4 nerds.
It's damn important.
That's not your OTs, but no, it's gotten very good reception so far. Good. So we're very pleased with that.
Good. I did read the thing. I have gone through it a couple of times and tried to, I wanted to find a good question. I don't know if I have any, but you know how I roll. But well, first off, because you talk about specifically, you're pointing to the commercial space industry, and now that could mean a lot of things. And when I looked as far as percentages of total, there's also that's different from the global space economy. But it turns out the commercial space economy it's a big chunk of the global sector. Maybe it's better than to ask you what is the commercial space economy. Maybe it's better to ask you what it is not. Let's start with that.
That's actually the right question, because they are concentric circles, right? The commercial space economy fits inside the global space economy. Global space economy includes civil space, defense space, whereas the commercial space economy tries to kind of pull that out, which is really, really hard to do, because as we all know, the government dollars fall through the industry. a government dollar that goes to Boeing that then goes to a contractor is still technically a government dollar, even though it's not being counted as a government dollar anymore, right? So it's really hard to do. But the commercial space industry is meant to be an approximation of the space industry that sits outside the government realm.
Okay. All right. I know what you said there. Sometimes somewhere in there, it's like, 20% of the money that's going through that industry is government sourced of one kind or another.
When we start talking about this double counting, it could be as much as 60% in reality, right? Like, I don't think anybody really knows the answer to that. I'd be fascinated if somebody could figure out how to find the answer to that. That would be probably more exciting than the paper we're here to talk about, if somebody could actually figure out that number.
But I was assuming that at least most of that's probably defense dollars, because they have a budget that's 40 times the size of NASA's. So I mean, there's we always talk about the NASA money that drips through the system. Especially back in the glory days of COTS and all that. Now they're a customer of SpaceX once in a while, but they're still building SLS. I don't want to go into that. That's another story for another time, obviously. But so how of that big chunk, how much of that you classify as new space as we know it, or is it all one thing?
It's not, and again, there's some really fuzzy pieces here where the aerospace primes end and where the space startups begin, and then all the kind of medium-sized companies in the middle, and how the dollars are flowing from one to the other. But I would say that the majority of the growth that we see in the commercial space sector is down to the startup side. Yes, some of these medium and larger enterprises are growing kind of just barely above inflation rates, but the real growth, the real kind of hockey stick that we're seeing in the industry is coming from the startup sector.
Okay, cool. That's good for us, and it's good for everybody who's invested. It's good for Space Fund. It's good for Michael. Michael, I want to get you into this. I want to get your thoughts on the whole thing, because I did see that graph in the thing where they showed that the other asset market sectors, they were varying widely during this period, and while there were ups and downs in the commercial space sector, they never dipped below nothing, and or go into negative territory. And so it's a slightly, if you drew a line through it, it'd be a slightly uphill graph the whole time. What do you think is happening here, and why does space sector seem to be less likely to suffer all these slings and arrows, even after 2 black swan events in the last 17 years?
Right. Well, I think it's useful, first of all, to kind of, for people that are listening that aren't either significant public markets investors or even private equity investors, to understand why being uncorrelated is an interesting and good thing from an investment standpoint. If you're investing in a group of stocks and they are all tied to, for example, the consumer economy, they will all move with each other. And so you're not really getting what we call alpha, which is that deviation from the norm that usually gets you growth if you're a halfway reasonable investor. If all of your investments are correlated, you might as well just buy an index fund. And that way you get rid of any of the risk that's associated with any specific pick you might get. What you would like to have is a set of stocks that are uncorrelated with each other. So when one particular segment is down, the odds are pretty good that the other part of your portfolio is not also down at the same time. And by being uncorrelated, that's what gets you that diversified portfolio. If all you're buying are shoe stocks, when shoes go out of favor, you're going to get screwed. You're not going to be able to keep your portfolio together. At least Starbridge's theory, we have two kind of data points that lead us to believe that it's uncorrelated, and that was one of the reasons why we created Starbridge. Is we kind of knew it was uncorrelated to the start, but never really had the time to do what Megan and her co-authors were able to do, and we definitely appreciate it. And we're out using her paper when we're talking to LPs, which is
good.
Right. So there's two things. I also suspect that if you were to look at the pharmaceutical industry, it's also mostly uncorrelated with what we kind of call consumer stocks. You get sick and need a medication, not based on what interest rates are or what whether it's Christmas or not. So it's uncorrelated with a lot of other things. And so that comes from two things. A, it's a need. It's a need that you can't plan for. But B, its product development cycles are longer than most. So they stretch over the cycles that happen in the consumer markets. And the space sector, we think that's one aspect of it. It's a very hardware intensive, but it's not just hardware. There's a lot of development that has to be done. So you got a development and a build cycle. That means that your normal go-to-market time stretches over what are normal cyclic kind of consumer tied markets. The other is the role of the federal government. And we're seeing that right now with the downturn we had in late 22 and all of 23 and a little bit of 24 related to interest rates heading back up. The luck that we had that Congress decided when it was having its budget negotiations to exempt the DoD from any of those budget cuts. That allowed the DoD to keep writing checks when no one else was. And so when you have a purely commercial market where the government doesn't have anything to do with, like bubble gum, you'll go with that market, and there's no one else that's buying and acting as a consumer of that product or service that is also acyclic. Well, another way of saying uncorrelated. And those two things together sort of mean that you got two things in your favor of the space sector kind of running above these cycles that happen much more quickly down below it in the rest of the economy. So we think it's those kind of two things. I did have a question for Megan real quick.
Sure.
I don't have the paper in front of me, but did you guys use any of the Bureau of Economic Analysis data in that paper?
We looked at it. It was less, it was not exactly the type of data that we needed to fit in with the other market data that we were getting, because they were kind of different ways of measuring it. So this was the data set that we felt was the most congruent with the data sets that were publicly available for the other asset classes. So we did play with a bunch of different data sets, and I am familiar with that one.
Yeah, I do think the BEA is probably the most pessimistic because it does a really, really good job of not double counting.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And that is one of the reasons, I think that we all have hypothesized that the industry does have so much stability is because of the government dollars. So that, and during COVID, most of these companies got the right designations to stay open. There's kind of, it does help. It doesn't hurt to have that kind of stable government dollar and government investment into the industry. And so
it is going to be interesting to see how correlated it is to interest rates, because as our interest rates went up, the amount of private dollars that are willing to take, that were able to take a risk on the space sector really did dry up. Well, as pretty much all of venture capital did through most of 23. There were a lot of companies that would not exist if interest rates hadn't been at zero for 2019, 20, 21, 22. And so now that we're in a normal interest rate environment, the effect that's going to have on the types of startups that are able to make their way through the gauntlet is going to be quite interesting, I think.
So you just gave yourself your next paper assignment there, Michael.
As soon as I was sitting here looking at yours.
That is correlation to interest rates, okay?
Right, but you could say that it's really correlated to anything that is hardware intensive. Right. I do think being one of the people that prior to my space career was highly involved in the internet sector, the SaaS model of software as a service spoiled investors to think that you could throw some pizza and sodas in a room and come out with $1 billion startup in 3 weeks. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry. The rest of the economy works at an entirely different scale and speed, and space is just like the rest of them. And
atoms are different than bits.
Yes.
And Silicon Valley got really, really good at investing in bits, and they forgot that there's a physical world that they have to live and operate in, and that those tech companies.
But I think a lot of the things that, and this is where I think the space sector needs to learn from, is what Silicon Valley got right was essentially solve the whole problem. Don't nibble around the edges. Small companies in Silicon Valley never make it. You either go big or go home. You solve the whole problem. In space, if your itch is to be a rocket engine company, that's a very, very hard row to hoe, and you're probably not going to get investment dollars. Just because, as I was telling AIAA last week at Ascend, this era of small family-owned aerospace machine shops around the country feeding into this giant aerospace supply chain with, 2,000 to 3,000 vendors for parts was an artificially created animal of federal districts for federal dollars going into every single small house district. And that's not natural. And I think what we're seeing in the space sector on the commercial side with these bigger companies being able to do what SpaceX has done and integrate, look at Rocket Lab. I love their IPO because they rolled up their entire supply chain, which is what you do.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, that kind of raises the question too. I know Space Fund does a lot of research into a lot of different things, and you have a lot of databases that you allow people to peruse. And when you were speaking of the rocket companies, I just wanted to bring that up for a second, Megan, because last time I checked that, and maybe the number has changed, but there is something on the order of 116, 120 different rocket companies.
183.
183 rocket companies.
Launch companies. So this includes non-rocket launch things as well. So so launch companies, not just rocket companies.
That's a whole lot of startup launch companies. Okay, so someday there's got to be a shakeout. How many of these things do the world really need, and what how many are going to make the cut to actually go to another level and actually provide some value in wherever they're working?
Well, not to plug myself too much here, but according to the paper I wrote in 2019 on this topic, we estimated that 20 would thrive. Maybe more of them would survive, but that we think 20 will thrive. And that's mostly due to governments wanting their own national capability for launch onshore. So you'll have 1 or 2 in the UK, 1 or 2 in Australia, 1 or 2 in Japan, right? A couple in India probably, and the U.S. government is looking for resiliency. They want multiple onshore launch options that are American as well, and so that's where you're going to get the redundancy. The market doesn't have enough need for even 20 rocket companies to survive without the government customer needing that strategic capability.
Well, yeah, when I saw lists like that, though, those same companies over and over just keep piling up and piling up. This is how my hair became the way it did. I mean, reading that thing, it was it was pretty horrendous. I said, what is going on here? I want to circle that back just a little bit because your paper's showing this again, this big difference between the other asset class type of products. And so now that's a measure of money coming in. Yeah.
It's the total size. So total revenue of the industry is
revenue as well. Cause I was going to say, is there going to be a future study of, actual value add or rates of return, for example, compared to other markets?
I would love to have a big enough sample size of exits to do such research. And as soon as they do, you better believe I'm going to do that research study. But we just don't have enough exits yet. And certainly not any good ones. Like so many of the SPACs were just not good representations of the industry. We really need quite a bit more data before we can say any of that with any real capability.
Can I get Michael to tell the quote? I don't even know if you remember that you said it, but you said something along the lines that pros passed on all of those, and only amateurs bought the SPAC into the SPACs. I think that's Megan just brought up kind of an important point that I want other people to hear.
Sure. So we all started, Megan and everybody else, we were seeing these SPACs coming up everywhere. And when we looked at the company, now there are some exceptions. Rocket Lab actually had a plan. They knew exactly what they were going to do with doing an IPO. And a SPAC is just a shortcut way to do an IPO. But a lot of the other ones, I would say that the vast majority were companies that the VCs had passed on because either the market was too small, margins were too low, various different reasons. And when they couldn't raise money through venture capital firms, they would go out to individual family offices and high net worth individuals, which is where you go to next. And hopefully you'll find somebody that doesn't know the space sector and is kind of fooled by your projections. When that didn't work, they were casting around, and that's when Chamath Palihapitiya and a few other people started seeing that these people would sign any term sheet you put in front of them. And that's how you ended up with several of these companies going through SPACs that really should not have been public. I used to be a huge advocate, and Tom knows this. It goes back a long way when we were talking about how can we help non-accredited investors to be able to invest in space companies. A long time ago, we were all talking about that. Yeah. And after watching, how people reacted to these SPACs and everything, I really do think that public markets investors make really terrible early stage tech investors. So.
Yeah.
Well, and it's beyond that. It's space industry companies. They measure their timelines on multiple years, and Wall Street measures its timeline on quarters. Right. And you're not going to see returns quarter over quarter in a space startup company. You're just not. The two mindsets are incompatible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to have to cut it off here soon, but I have like the last couple of questions I want to throw out there. Megan, in your paper, you said that we may have still for this industry, a 10 to 15 year window of opportunity. I'd like you to talk about that just for 30 seconds.
Yeah, Michael actually mentioned this earlier. The closer that an industry is tied to consumers, the more it moves with the market. And right now, the space industry is largely insulated, but with the proliferation of things like Starlink, that's going to be all consumer customers. As you're getting more and more of these kind of direct cell phone from satellite, all of these different kind of consumer products, even live video from space, rides to the edge of space in balloons, it's becoming more and more consumer oriented. So eventually the two are going to start moving in a better correlation with each other. The timing and amount of that change is anybody's guess, but my gut is telling me we've probably got another 10 or 15 years of this lack of correlation in order to really make some robust returns from it.
Okay. And final, what is that weird connection with Bitcoin that you mentioned? What is that about?
Oh man, so Bitcoin's so volatile that when you put the space industry graph, which as you've seen, it kind of does it up and down. When you put that next to the Bitcoin graph, the Bitcoin numbers go so far and so down. The change, the amount of change is so significant that the space industry looks completely flat in comparison. And so I just found that absolutely hilarious. So I did include that chart in the paper. I called it out because it was just a really fun looking chart, So,
it makes you want to buy the VIX version of Bitcoin, just to track the volatility. Yeah.
Okay. Megan Crawford, Michael Mealy, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great topic. I hope we get back together again sometime soon and revisit that and other great topics along these same lines. Thanks for coming.
Sounds
Thanks,
great.
Tom. Thanks, Mike. Good to see you again, Megan.
Bye, all.
And there we have it. Actually, it's a wrap for our first show. How do you feel about that?
I'm feeling good. I love our guests. I met you the same day that I met Michael Mealing, and we've been talking about the money of space
ever since.
2003. I actually kind of went backwards and looked it up. It's 2003. So talking about the money of space is a thing that we've all been doing. So, and Megan's been doing this for 15 years. So, and then just to see it actually working in Emmett and his excitement and his enthusiasm. Yeah, great show. Nice job.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. So, folks, we will be back 2 weeks from tonight, August 27th, and we'll have some other great topics to cover, and maybe we'll be a little more slick next time. We'll find out. We were getting the bugs out, but thank you for being with us, folks. It's been a fun time to do. I'm looking forward to doing a whole bunch of these, over the next year or so, and we'll see where we go. But for now, my name is Thomas Andrew Olson, and from the news desk at the Center for Space Commerce and Finance, keep watching the skies.